Welcome in everyone to First Down Punts, a new show for you about the world of football and how it applies to fantasy football, all season, every season. As always, thanks for watching. Now, let's start the show.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome in to another episode of First Down Punts. I'm your host, Coach Chris. Today we're going to be going over the best and worst moves for all 16 NFC teams. We did the AFC teams already. If you haven't seen that yet, I'll put a link here at the beginning of the video. Just click on that if you want to go check it out. We'll go through, like I said, all 16 teams by division. It'll be like one or two moves per team. And just letting you know what I think they've done well and what they haven't done so far in the offseason between free agency and the draft and the people they didn't resign or did resign. There'll be, different choices I make for each team, but definitely going to be letting you know how I feel about what their moves are being made right now. Before we get into that, some sad news in the NFL. Colts owner Jim Irsay passed away yesterday at the age of 65. My condolences go out to the Colts family, or to the Irsay family, the Colts organization, and, all the Colts fans, man, the NFL as a whole. Irsay's been a very good steward for the NFL as far as trying to make it a better game. And the one thing I always liked about Irsay was he was a hell of a fan for the game. He wasn't just an owner trying to make money, which we see plenty of in the NFL. But he actually loved the game of football. He grew up around it. His dad was the owner. He took over. And so just wanted to send that out, and rest in peace, Mr. Irsay. You're a hell of a steward for the game. In other NFL news, in the owners' meetings, the Tush Push survived. They did not get the votes needed. 10 teams voted against it. They needed 24 total votes. They only got 22. And I'm happy about that. I know there's a lot of people that aren't. But I think if you want to stop a guy, then draw something up or start squatting, because Jalen Hurts is putting in the work and he shouldn't be penalized for putting in the work. The dude can squat like 500-600 pounds or something like that. The leg strength is there. And my team benefited from the ability for teammates to push him when David Montgomery got carried like 9 extra yards on a play. So it's entertaining to me, and it's such a hard judgment. I get the immediate push, all the wording they were trying to do, but I'm glad it didn't get banned. I guarantee it's going to be up for vote again, probably just because of how close it was at next year's owners' meetings. And we'll see what happens. As far as the Lions go, they withdrew their playoff reseeding, where it would be the best records get, 1 through 7, as opposed to the division winners get 1 through 4, and then the other teams are just the 5, 6, 7 seeds are just, the best ranked team based off record. So I'm impartial to that either way. I mean, I like the tradition that has always been there. And it's like every 5-6 years we get a team that has a losing record win their division. And it's not their fault their division sucked. It was just they won enough of the games that they win the division. So I get, Vikings had a great argument. If the Lions would have lost that last game, we'd have had a great argument. Like, man, we should be the number 2 seed or 3 seed or whatever. But at the end of the day, I like the tradition that we have of the division winners gets a home playoff game. And I wasn't in agreement with the approach to try to change it. But if it had changed, it wouldn't be that big a deal. So you're still a division winner. You just aren't guaranteed the home playoff game anymore. But I think that's kind of the reward for winning your division. So, like I said, I was kind of impartial to it either way. It wasn't going to make a big difference when it comes to playoff games. The atmosphere is great. In other news, the 49ers are dropping bags of cash off at players' doorsteps. Purdy got $53 million a year. Kittle got paid, I think it was 4 for $76, like a week and a half ago or whatever. And then Fred Warner also got paid and became the highest paid linebacker, which he should be because he's the best middle linebacker in the fucking game. So good for those guys. They couldn't keep everybody, obviously. They lost Greenlaw and Hufanga and a couple other guys, guard, to KC, but they kept their core pieces that are probably like Fred Warner and George Kittle are probably the best at their position as overall players. I definitely think Fred Warner is the best middle linebacker in the game. And there's argument to be made to George Kittle based off his blocking, his mentality, his team leadership, his receiving skills. All that is definitely he's in contention for the best tight end in the league. And I have Sam Laporte on my team, who I absolutely love. But I'm just being honest with you. Kittle's one hell of a football player, so he deserves to be paid. So I'm glad those guys got their money. There's still rumors that Chris Olave could be traded, so something to keep an eye out for. I just want to remind you guys of that. Best news for the Lions: Aiden Hutchinson cleared for football activities, baby. Let's go, Hutch. Not only were you leading the team in sacks, or hell, leading the league in sacks through, I think it was 6 weeks, 7 weeks, for you broke your leg. You're just one hell of a football player, man. You're a team leader, and I'm so happy that Hutch is going to be able to play football, starting off in OTAs and all that good stuff, where he's going, or in training camp and everything. Once that gets going, he'll be ready to roll. Which I love the dude. I was so happy when we got him. It's great for him as being a hometown kid in Michigan. There, being a Lions fan, it's just a good story. But he's a hell of a football player. That's why I love having him on my team. I don't care if you're from Detroit. I don't care if you live next door to the stadium if you're not good at football. Good for you and everything, but. At the end of the day, I'm glad to hear he's back. A couple other things over. The Browns have Kenny Pickett and Dylan Gabriel taking the first and second snaps, which I think is a terrible mistake. I said it in my AFC review. Those are two of their worst decisions this offseason. And honestly, I think they're announcing it right now, possibly because those are the two competing for a roster spot. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see how either of those should be the starting quarterback in Cleveland this year. It should be Joe Flacco to start because he's a veteran. He knows he can still wing it. He knows how to run an offense. You need stability at the quarterback position. And eventually you should transition to Shedeur Sanders in the second half of the season if they're not winning by any means. If they are winning, leave Flacco in there. But if they're not, I get the transition to the young kids. So the other thing, another AFC North team, the Bengals. I talked about this in my AFC review, or the best and worst video. Their management, man, with their defensive players is just unfucking believable. Between not re-signing Hendricks or extending Hendrickson and this whole charade with you better show up or we're going to fine you, it's fucking ridiculous. And then you move on to the rookie defensive players who their waivers don't cover their contract with insurance for them to get on the field. And now there's nonsense about the signing the second-round pick, Demetrius Knight, who is a hell of a football player. Why'd you draft him if you don't want to pay him what the slot pays? This shit is basically set up for them for every pick in the NFL draft. Yeah, you can haggle over guarantees and stuff like that, but it shouldn't be that fucking hard. And the Bengals just continue to fail at that. And it just blows my mind. So, other than that, guys, we're going to get into this. We're going to start in the NFC East for all you Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders, and Giants fans. We're going to start with the Cowboys. I feel like the best move they made all offseason was trading for George Pickens because Dak needs another option. CeeDee Lamb needs some of the pressure taken off of him. Now, there's questions about Pickens' attitude in Pittsburgh and all that other stuff. And I don't feel Pickens is a true number one. I think he's a great number two to have. And for him to be next to CeeDee Lamb, his life should be easy. They still got Ferguson, the tight end. And with Jaden Blue coming out the backfield, Dak's fantasy gold this year in my mind, guys. So just a heads up on that. I'm going to have him ranked higher probably than a lot of people. And now maybe not because with the trade for Pickens, a lot of people are going to – I already had Dak ranked pretty high, just getting the Jaden Blue kid coming out the backfield and still having Ferguson and Lamb. He's definitely going to be higher getting Pickens for the simple fact that he gets more options. The other thing I like that the Cowboys did was their trades, man. I mean, not just for Pickens, but for Kenneth Murray, the linebacker from Tennessee, Kyer Elam, the cornerback from Buffalo, and Joe Milton, the quarterback from New England, who snapped in Week 18 last year as a for fantasy and just for stats in the NFL. Man, he played a hell of a game that game, and it's a good backup because they lost Cooper Rush in free agency. So to get Joe Milton, like I liked all those trades. And then just building the depth, man, across their team. I thought they did a really good job of backfilling some depth behind the starters they already have. So a lot of these moves just were doing that. Just Joe Milton behind Prescott. Prescott's got hurt a couple times, man. Now you got Milton behind who has some potential. Definitely has some potential. So that should be exciting for them. Their worst moves, their failure to really get better or to better address the running back situation. You had so many options to draft guys earlier in the draft that would have helped your team tremendously. Like I love the Tyler Booker pick. I already talked about that in the draft review. I gave them a good grade for that. I think Tyler Booker is one hell of a guard. It's going to help help that offensive line shore up some holes that they had last year, especially with the retirement and free agent and all that. So, but their failure to address and get a dominant running back in a draft that had so many 3-down running backs available to be drafted, and just getting a receiving back in Jaden Blue, who you hope can be a good runner. It's just, I didn't think it was a great move on their part. So the other thing I didn't really like was not extending Micah. They haven't extended Micah Parsons yet. I don't know what you're waiting for. He's one of the best defensive players in the NFL. This goes back just like the Bengals with Hendrickson. What are you guys doing, man? Get it together and sign your franchise players that are building blocks to a better team. There's no doubt about that. Micah's proved everything he needs to prove to you. I don't understand why the Cowboys have to wait to the end of the offseason all the time and overpay guys because they waited to be the last people to pay them. It just doesn't make sense. So, on to the New York Giants. The first thing I really liked, the best moves, was addressing the quarterback situation at all, period. Getting Russ, getting Jameis, and drafting Jackson Dart, great job. You are putting as much emphasis on fixing that problem that you've had over the last 4, 5, 6, 10 years since Eli was gone. I don't remember how long ago it was with Eli, 5, 6 years ago. And even him at the end of his career wasn't super great. So at the end of the day, though, they attacked it. Russ is a professional. He's going to know how to get people in and out the offense. Jameis is a fantasy dream for all of us fantasy football players just because we believe he'll target Malik Neighbors 52 times a game. And Jackson Dart's your future. And I like Jackson Dart a lot. I told you he's like a little bit bigger Brock Purdy, a little bit quicker Brock Purdy, but he plays like Brock Purdy to me, and I like Brock Purdy a lot, and Brock Purdy just got paid that $53 million a year. So definitely a good move by shoring up that position and trying to correct what has been a terrible situation for the last few years. You want Brian Daboll's a great offensive mind. You need to give him someone that's worth a damn, and you finally have in my mind. So the other thing I really liked you guys did, I talked about this in the AFC video with the Dolphins blew it with, was you signed Javon Holland, the safety from the Dolphins. Love this kid. Think he's a great safety. This is one of your better moves this offseason, Giants, and great job on that because you need help on the back end of that defense anyways. And with getting Abdul Carter in the front end, he's only going to be more impactful because the quarterback has less time. So good move on that. The things I didn't like, failing to acquire more receiving talent. You have Neighbors, great. But other than that, what else have you done, man? And they're a team that I think could possibly trade for Olave, and a sneaky trade could be for someone like DJ Moore, which I'll get into that when I get to the Bears. But I think DJ Moore could end up getting traded at some point this season, whether it's before the season or before the trade deadline. Just someone to look out for besides Chris Olave, and something to keep your eyes out for. So, but I feel like they definitely needed to improve their receiving options, and they haven't done that yet. And then the other thing was really just their O-line. They need to continue to work on that offensive line. They made some improvements, so credit to that, but not enough in my mind. So you need to keep your quarterbacks upright. Russ ain't nearly as mobile as he was in his younger days. Jameis is pretty much a statue for the most part, other than a couple plays he sneaks out. Dart's mobile, but he ain't playing to start the season, or hopefully all season in your mind. So we'll see what happens, but I just feel like they kind of let the offense down a little bit other than getting those quarterbacks. So we'll see what happens, though. But on to the Eagles. The Eagles, best move of the offseason so far, drafting Jahad Campbell, linebacker in the end of the first round there at 31. I love the kid. He was a top 15 talent in my mind. To get him, I know he's coming off injury, but he's a steal there at 31, and that's your best move to offseason so far, Philadelphia. The other thing I really liked that they did was extending their core players between Cam Jurgens, Lane Johnson, Saquon Barkley, and Zach Bond, who they got on a cheap deal last year. But they lost some defensive players. They were getting paid, so they had a little bit of money to spend, but couldn't keep everyone. They did keep those core players. They paid Barkley some more money because, hell, he ran for 2,000. I get it. Maybe not the brightest decision financially, but definitely understand the move with who Saquon Barkley is as a player and whatnot. The things I didn't like, they lost some of those key defensive players by just, it's cap casualties, but it still hurts your team. Losing a Josh Sweat, losing a Milton Williams to New England. having to trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson away. Now, you got Kenyon Green back, the guard for him. I like that. But you lost Mekhi Becton, who was 6'6", 330. That's a big man to replace, and you hope Kenyon Green can do it. So we'll see what happens with that. But the rest of the offensive line is awesome, and securing those stalwarts and paying Lane, here at the end of his career, that's a good move on their part. But just losing defensive key players off of that championship run that they had last year is going to hurt their defense no matter what you say. So, but getting Campbell's good, definitely going to help that. The other thing, the other thing I said was not re-signing Mekhi Becton, because you would have loved to keep him and keep that cohesion along that offensive line unit. So as far as the Commanders go, their number one moves I like the most are trading for Debo and Tunsil, Laramie Tunsil. Debo Samuel, a wide receiver who's a weapon. He's not just a wide receiver. We all know that. And who knows how much he's going to do that in Washington. I know that with Cliff Kingsbury, there's a good chance that Debo's going to be making a run for a staple back if he can stay healthy this season. He's the last one to do it at receiver. He could definitely do it this year if Kingsbury puts him in the position I think he can put him in. So as for fantasy and for football, we should see Debo involved quite a bit in my mind. And getting Laramie Tunsil just to help out that left tackle position. I was talking to a Houston fan on the comments of the AFC review, and he was just telling me stuff about Tunsil that I didn't really know was going on. He was kind of pointing fingers at guys instead of taking blame for the penalties, the false starts and stuff. And I don't know the whole story. Just, for Houston, I get that they want to get rid of him. At the end of the day, he's still a top half of the league left tackle when it comes to pass blocking. And with Jaden Daniels out there, you got to keep him safe. So I still feel like that's a good move. Hopefully he matures and learns from the situation in Houston or whatever. But definitely a good move on their part to get a left tackle to protect Jaden. The other thing I really liked they did was drafting Josh Connerly, kid out of Oregon, and Trey Amos. The first and second round picks, nailed them, Washington. Nailed them. Love Trey Amos, very physical corner, big guy, tackling machine. Like, I like him a lot. And getting Connerly, who can play left or right tackle, is a great pick for them. So I think they got him at 29. Their worst moves, not really securing any long-term receiving options. Debo's an older player. They signed a couple, middle, just guys. They lost Diami Brown. They still got Noah Brown, who I do like. I think he has potential. Was originally a Houston Texan, ended up coming over to Washington. But Debo, maybe he has a year or 2 years left at best of real peak physical ability, and he's still got to stay healthy. So them not getting another receiver, a young guy in the draft or something that you can develop behind Debo or behind McLaurin. And the other bad move is not extending Terry McLaurin. He's your number one wide receiver. You've seen what happened when you got a real quarterback out there. This guy balled out. Lock this guy up. Keep your number one receiver there for at least 3-4 more years and let him do what he's supposed to do for Jaden Daniels. And let him finally get paid off for staying there this whole time. Because he's been through some shit with those quarterbacks you've had before Jaden. But so that's the NFC East. Move on to the NFC North, my Lions division. We'll kick it off with the Bears. Up to the draft, the Bears were winning the offseason, period. I love their offensive line additions with Tooney and Dahlman and Jonah Jackson, former Lion and Ram. They just re-signed Tooney to a 2-year deal, I think it was, extension with like 25 million guaranteed or something like that, 31 total. I forget what the numbers were, so I don't want to swear to any of those. But signing them and locking them up for a couple more years to end his career probably there in Chicago and be a leader and have that security to know he's going to be there is good for Tooney. And they got the 2 young tackles who I think they could have replaced in the draft, maybe one of them, but we'll see what happens this year. Getting those veterans on the inside is definitely going to help the guys on the edges. Just learning from them, having vets next to them. Because, like I said, Jonah Jackson was part of a top 3 offensive line 2 years ago or 3 years ago with the Lions. And he was the weakest link on that line, but he was still top 5, top 3 line part of that unit. So he's a good player. I like the kid. I was surprised. He got banged up in Los Angeles with the Rams. and didn't perform as well as they had hoped. So they trade him to the Bears. Bears are hoping he's healthy and he can play, because when he can play, he's a damn good player. So I really like those offensive line moves they did before the draft. And signing Grady Jarrett, the defensive tackle from the Falcons. I love that move. That's great for any defense. Grady Jarrett's one hell of a defensive tackle, one hell of a football player, and going to help that Chicago defense out a lot. So those are two of their two best moves of the offseason so far were really those three interior offensive linemen and getting Grady Jarrett. As far as their worst moves, they failed to attack the running back position. That's the way I would say it. They had opportunities to either trade up in the second there or even take a guy like Caleb Johnson, someone that can be a 3-down back. R.J. Harvey with one of those 2 second-round picks. They missed out on Henderson and Judkins in the second round. They didn't take Hampton in the first round. They didn't get Genty because he went to the Raiders. But getting Monagai or whatever it was in the 7th round, he's a decent guy, but I don't know if he's going to be anything for them. So they're counting on DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson. And maybe Ben Johnson likes them guys a lot and thinks he can do something, but he's already had DeAndre Swift, and he didn't count on him much that season. That was the year Jamal Williams had 21 touchdowns or whatever it was for the Lions. So I don't see them not making a move between now and free agency. I think they need to make a move to get a better running back to help that offense, to help Caleb Williams, and to just be someone you can keep on the field for all 3 downs. Now, maybe you can't find it. Maybe you can. Maybe you sign Chubb and you use Swift as a receiving back. Maybe you trade for James Cook or a guy, one of those guys like that. We'll see what happens, but I just feel like that was their biggest mistake for this offseason, was not getting a running back. And their other move, I talked about this in the draft review videos, part of why I gave him a bad grade, was drafting Colston Loveland at pick 10. I don't think he should have been drafted that high. I think he should have took Tyler Warren, being that he was available, because Colston Loveland's a big-ass slot receiver and is not that great of a blocker. And they already have Cole Kmet there. This the same with the Luther Burden picks. I wasn't big on their draft because they kind of drafted the guys they already have. Now, if they, like I said with DJ Moore earlier, if they end up trading him, okay, Luther Burden fills that role. They got Rome Odunze, who's apparently having a great low OTAs right now, and who could take over the number 1 spot. And I'm sure in a lot of people's mind, he was a first-round pick. He was a stud out at Washington. So he's got the talent. And they're not just going to throw him to the side because they drafted Luther Burden in the 2nd round. So I just feel like those 2 picks and not addressing the running back was like a combination of mistakes that they could have improved their team so much more. And I'm sure Loveland and Burden are going to have success. It's not about their talent as players. It's about the decision of the team that drafted them and what they already had. So I just wasn't big on either of those decisions for the Bears. As for the Lions, their best move of the offseason so far is signing DJ Reed to replace Carlton Davis III. DJ Reed is a hell of a football player coming from the Jets, and a young guy. I think this is his 5th year in the league. Going to be his 5th year in the league. I think it was his 4th year last year. But I love the kid. I think he's a hell of a cornerback, and glad that we got him for the deal that we got him. So love that move. The other thing I was really happy about the Lions did, their best move was extending Kirby Joseph, as well as a few other players like Derek Barnes and who the hell was the other person they extended? I forget. I can't even remember my own team right now. I'm just thinking about all these other teams. But getting and having Hutch be healthy, that's great news for them. That's not nothing they did. But those 2 moves, as far as like extending Kirby Joseph and signing DJ Reed, are their best 2 moves of the offseason so far. Their worst moves, trading 3 third-round picks to move up 32 picks to draft Isaac Tesla. This isn't about the kid himself. It's about where they drafted him, and it's about what they paid to draft him. Now, I can make the argument of, from a GM's perspective, look, we only got so many roster spots. We can't keep all these picks and expect to keep the players that we drafted that we love. Now, you're going to lose guys no matter what because there's only so much money. But I also understand the idea that some of these picks we're just not going to be able to keep around, and it's better for us to move up and get the guy we want. My problem is I wouldn't have drafted Isaac Tesla there. So that's all there is to it. That's why I think that's the trading of 3 third-round picks to move up in the 3rd round is too much for my taste. I just didn't like the move. And the other thing I didn't really like that they did was not improving the pass rush. Hutchinson's coming off a broke leg. I'm glad that he's back. They re-signed Davenport. We got 11 defensive linemen, 12 defensive linemen. I think we should trade 2 of those and a pick for Trey Hendrickson, because I would much rather have one guy than 3 guys. Because right now, those are taking up roster spots that none of them are dominant players. And none of them are as good as Trey Hendrickson. That's for damn sure. And you're hoping Davenport stays healthy. When healthy, he's an awesome player, man. I love watching the guy play. I still think we could bring back Zadarius Smith to play defensive end, but he's an older guy. He's like 35, 36, so I can't guarantee that's an option. And it would just be throwing another body at the problem. I don't want to throw bodies at the problem. I want to put a talented football player out there. And that's where I feel like we need to address that so much more. But we'll see what happens. Maybe we make a trade. Maybe they sign one of these veteran free agents. I don't know. But these are the 2 moves that really pissed me off by the Lions. I think they were the worst decision so far this offseason. The Packers, Green Bay Packers on the board. Their best move, signing guard Aaron Banks. They need to improve that offensive line for the running back and for Jordan Love. Give him a little bit more time. Hopefully some of those number 2 receivers they got can get open eventually. At the end of the day, improving your offensive line is always going to be my number 1 priority. The other thing I thought they did was signing McManus, the kicker. McManus, I know he had his issues last year off the field. They got all clear to that stuff, and it was time for them to get a new kicker. They needed to replace the guy they had and get somebody they can count on. McManus has got a big leg. He's been a veteran kicker, consistent kicker for the majority of his career, and definitely a player that they could use, because they might have lost some games last year because of kicking issues and the field goals. So I thought those are 2 really good signings. They didn't really make a lot of moves, and I think they only had 5 draft picks. The Packers just haven't done a lot right now. And maybe they're waiting to sign some of these veterans on cheaper deals. But right now, these are their best 2 moves. Signing Banks, great move. Signing McManus, really good move, just because special teams does matter, guys. We're still playing football here. You might not make it into the red zone or into the end zone. You need someone who can kick a field goal that you don't have to hold your damn fingers crossed going, please make this, because that's what it's felt like in Green Bay the last few years. So, worst moves for the Packers, their failure to acquire a true number 1 wide receiver for another year. Everybody's like, oh, hooray, we finally drafted a number 1 receiver in the first round after 20 years, and you still got a number 2 receiver. I'm not as big on Golden as everybody else is. His speed is great. I think he's got talent. But I keep going back to the fact that you have 2 NFL draft prospects at Texas playing quarterback, and you didn't have 1,000 yards, even after Isaiah Bond went down. That's a problem to me. He had a great little run in the playoffs, and that's why he got drafted in the first round, I guarantee you. Because not having 1,000 yards for a good team with a good offense, with good quarterback play, in college, no less, with that speed, is a concern for me. And I feel like he's just another one of those guys. Then they go and draft Savion Williams just to clutter up the damn wide receiver room some more, man. Jaden Reed's out there going, what's the plan for me? It just wasn't that great a move to me. Just not acquiring a true number 1. They could have they could go trade for somebody. They could have signed Adams back maybe. You never know if they would have tried, but just at the end of the day, man, I feel like they still haven't got a number 1 receiver. Great for the Lions, bad news for the Packers. The other thing I didn't like that he did was signing McCole Hardman. I don't even understand that damn signing. Like I said, they haven't made a lot of moves to be judged on. This is one that I just don't understand. You draft 2 receivers. Now, you signed Hardman before that, but Hardman is just another one of those guys. Just another guy to throw out there on the field and hope that he does something. You have to have a better plan than that at receiver. You have to have a true number 1. You hope you have a real number 2. They got 4 number 2s and no number 1s. I don't know what to think about that. McCole Hardman's like a number 4 receiver. So I'm just confused by the Packers' decisions at receiver. Once again, stumped why they won't help Jordan Love out. I'm a football fan at the end of the day, guys. I'm a Lions fan. I love when the Packers, Bears, and Vikings make terrible decisions. I love that the Bears didn't get a running back. I love that the Packers still don't have a true number 1 wide receiver in my mind. So On to the Vikings. The Vikings, best thing they did this offseason was build up those trenches, man. Signed 2 defensive tackles in Jonathan Williams or Jonathan Allen. I forget what the kid's name is. And Hargrave from San Francisco, Javon Hargrave, great moves. Hargrave's coming off injury, but he can still help that team out. And then on the offensive side, they signed Ryan Kelly, signed the other Colts, Colts guard, Will Fries, and drafted Donovan Jackson. So love what they did in the trenches. Absolutely love it, Vikings. You needed to do it. And protecting J.J. McCarthy's got to be your number one priority this year. You got to give this kid a chance if you want him to succeed. The other thing I thought they did that I really liked was re-signing Byron Murphy, their corner, because they need DBs, man. And one of their worst moves was not improving the DB room enough. At least you kept Byron Murphy, but you lost Cam Bynum. That's the other worst move. You lost Cam Bynum to the Colts. And I get it, there's only so much money to go around, but come on, man, you can't be losing the best players you got because these guys have to stay there. You're already down guys. You already don't have enough talent at that position. And now you're losing guys to free agents. Now, I'm glad you kept Murphy, but they got to improve that defensive room, that defensive back room at the end of the day, especially in this division where it's only getting better on the offensive side of things for the rest of the teams. So Vikings, you missed the boat on that one. On to the NFC South. We start with the Falcons. Number one thing they did that I loved, extending Jake Matthews. They need to keep that offensive lineman right where he is. Protect Michael Penix. You got the second-year player coming in. He was a rookie last year, played at the end of the season. Had a couple decent games, a so-so game. But I love Michael Penix. I said this full-fledged last year out in open to people. I would have drafted Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams, and Michael Penix might have got drafted over Caleb Williams as well. That's just how much I like them both as prospects. It's easy for people to look at me saying this now and go, oh, of course you did because Caleb Williams had a bad year. No, my problem with Caleb Williams is a whole different story. I worry about his mental toughness. Michael Penix, I don't worry about his. Jaden Daniels, I don't worry about his. And Jaden Daniels proved me right already. Michael Penix is on the way to proving me right. But Caleb Williams was in a bad position last year. Things came out where, nobody was telling me what tape to watch and everything else. And I would love to hear the coach's side about that as well. You know, you only get one side of the story sometimes. And if that's the case, then, hey, man, they shouldn't have kept was it Eberflus? I think it was, Eberflus was the coach. They shouldn't have kept him the first year with Caleb Williams. They should have fired him last year. But at the end of the day, we'll see what happens. You got Benedict Johnson coming in as your new head coach there with Chicago. And Atlanta has Michael Penix starting in their offense, and which I love, absolutely love. And getting back to what I was talking about, their best move was re-signing Matthews, their left tackle, to protect Penix. So great move for them. And the other thing I really liked that they did was, for one, their entire draft, just drafting all those defensive players. The players they actually drafted were great. But getting Javon Walker at 15, then trading back up into the first round and get James Pierce, the other pass rusher, defensive end, who's a top 10 talent, but he has attitude questions, things you worry about. So he dropped in the draft. They moved back up to get him. And the Lions were actually trying to move up to get him too, apparently. That's the latest rumor coming out. So improving that pass rush, which they sorely needed to do, because their defense has to get off the field, and you can't do that without a pass rush. They got to get off the field on third down. Number one cure to that is rushing the passer. So good move by them. Both of those I like a lot. The things I don't like, they lost Dolman to the Bears, the center, and losing offensive linemen is never a good move. Now, they only got so much money. This was a cap casualty thing where they just couldn't afford to bring him back based off what the Bears were offering, and the Bears had a ton of money available. The other thing I didn't really like that they did was not adding really any offensive weapons. They're running it back with Pitts at tight end still, who's been a huge disappointment after being drafted number 4. And it looks even worse knowing he was drafted in front of Jamar Chase. Every year we go on. You got Bijan at running back, great. You got your number 2, though, Darnell Mooney, who shocked the hell out of me when I seen this. He had over 100 targets last year. I was like, oh, man, I wanted to draft Mooney in fantasy because I thought that was a good position for him to be in. Thought Kirk was going to play better. But he was coming off torn Achilles, and you've seen it with him and Rodgers. the seasons weren't the same as they were before the injury, and that's just something they have to deal with. Now, this year, maybe Kirk gets traded. We'll see what happens with that. But at the end of the day, them not adding offensive weapons, another receiver or a tight end in a draft that had a lot of them to just maybe replace Pitts. Maybe they end up trading Pitts if they would have got one of those higher rated tight ends. Maybe they got a guy that maybe if Pitts still doesn't pan out, they can just stick him in there and he's just better blocker, better receiver, maybe not a better receiving talent as far as physical gifts, but more reliable because Pitts has not been reliable. Now, we'll see what happens. Michael Penix is coming in. Maybe he finds a connection with Pitts. But as far as I'm concerned, Pitts is a bust right now with all those physical tools and not being able to put it together since his rookie season. It just doesn't make any sense. On to the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers, I think the best move they made, drafting Teteroa McMillan. I had them doing it in the mock draft earlier in the offseason. They needed a true number one. They got a true number one wide receiver in Teteroa McMillan. And I loved it. They got Jimmy Horton Jr. late in the draft, who was a hell of a receiver at Colorado. I definitely didn't think he was going to – I thought he'd probably be a fifth-round pick. And it sounds like he's snapping at camp right now, which is great for them. But getting Teteroa McMillan as the number one there, a big-body receiver for that little guy Bryce Young back there, you can't miss McMillan running down the field at 6'5". So definitely a good option for them, and his catch radius is impeccable. Like I said, I'm a big McMillan fan. Can't wait to see what he does. The other thing I really liked that they did was extending J.C. Horn, the corner, made him the highest paid corner, and like a week later, I think who was it? The Commanders? I forget who resigned their corner for more money. So he was only the highest paid corner for like 4 or 5 days or something like that. But all the same, keeping J.C. Horn is important. They don't have a lot of good defensive players. He's one of their best, if not their best defensive players. So keeping him was very important, and I'm glad to see they got that done. Some of the things I didn't like, the main thing I didn't like is they just didn't improve their offensive line. I forget who. I think they signed like some, middle of the pack guy, just nobody important in free agency. I think they signed 2 guys actually in free agency, but just not anybody of significant value. And they didn't spend a high pick on one because they got McMillan there. So I still am concerned for that. Now, last year they got Robert Hunt came from the Dolphins, so they've spent some money there, and they've spent draft picks there. But you need to continue to improve that offensive line, and I'm sure Liam Combs knows that. So we'll see what happens. Maybe they still sign one of these veterans that are out there. Maybe they sign or make a trade for a guy that some team drafted a young guy and they feel like they got enough depth or whatever, or get rid of a high-priced player. Carolina still got some money to spend. So we'll see what happens with that, but definitely need to improve that offensive line some more. On to the New Orleans Saints. Their best move of the offseason is drafting Tyler Shuck. You go back to my quarterback video, love this guy. You go back to my mock draft videos, love this guy. I am a huge Tyler Shuck fan. I believe if not for the injuries in college, he would be a first-round pick. He gets drafted at the top, I forget what the Saints pick at, what pick it was, 36 or something like that in the second round. I forget what it was now, 37. But I'm a huge Tyler Shuck fan. Now, we didn't know Derek Carr was going to retire. Maybe the Saints did. Maybe that's why they took Shuck in the second round there. But I would have liked Shuck to be able to sit for 8 games, first half of the season behind Derek Carr. But Derek Carr, he had a shoulder injury. He doesn't want to go through surgery, so he decided to retire. To me, that puts Shuck in the driver's seat. He should be starting this year. Is it going to be rough to start the year? Absolutely. The Saints aren't that good of a team. But they still have Kamara. They still have Olave when healthy is awesome. They still have Juwan Johnson down there who's a decent tight end. They could have drafted a guy, though. There's a team. They're another one of those teams that definitely should have drafted a tight end. Getting Tyler Shuck, I think, is a great move for them. Young quarterback, Kellen Moore to work with and see what they got and go from there. The other thing I thought they really did really well was signing Justin Reed, safety. Improve that defense, get him back down there, playing safety in the south side of the country. I think he was with the Texans last year or the Chiefs. I forget which one he was with last year now, but hell of a safety. I understand fully why they paid that man to come there. Great move by them. The thing that I didn't like, overpaying Juwan Johnson. I do like Juwan Johnson. I don't think they should have paid him what they paid him. I think I would have let him walk if that's what he was asking for, and definitely drafted one of these guys. But we'll see what happens. And the other thing I didn't like was just their O-line, not addressing O-line issues with any sorts of urgency. They lost 2 guys to retirement, one to free agency, I think it was. Or one to retire. No, 2 guys retired, I believe, this offseason for the Saints. So you needed to really address that situation. I don't feel like you did enough. And that could end up costing you the ability to develop Tyler Shuck faster because he's going to be playing with his hair on fire trying to get away from people if you can't block for him. So we'll see what happens. But right now, I'm not a big fan of them not addressing that issue. As for the last team in the NFC South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, won the division for the last couple of years. Their best move, to me, drafting Benjamin Morrison in the second round, the cornerback. They needed DB help, needed safety help. They got Benjamin Morrison, who is a hell of a cornerback when healthy. He's coming off an injury from last year at Notre Dame, but this is a guy, in my mind, they got to steal in the second round because he's a hell of a football player and he's a turnover machine. The other thing I thought they did really well, signing Hassan Reddick for defensive end. They needed help on defense. They got 2 really good players between drafting Morrison, and then signing Hassan Reddick to rush the pass. So that's a good combination of moves. They got Shiloh Sanders, an undrafted free agent, who I actually think has some really good potential as a safety. So we'll see what happens with that, and we'll see what happens with that defense with those 2 guys. But the things I didn't like, re-signing Godwin and all that money. Because you drafted one or the other. You drafted Emeka Egbuka at 19. I love Emeka Egbuka. Absolutely adore the guy. I think he's the most pro-ready wide receiver coming into the NFL out of college right this year. Like better than Hunter, more ready than Hunter, more ready than McMillan. McMillan still has to work on route development. Emeka Egbuka does everything at a high level. He's not dominant in anything. I said this before, but he does everything at a high level. Chris Godwin style player. So why would you re-sign Chris Godwin all that money if you were planning on taking Emeka Egbuka? Or why would you take Emeka Egbuka if Chris Godwin's worth all that money? So I'm a little confused by those decisions, that combination of decisions. Love both the players. I think they're both really good fucking players and would love to have them on your team when healthy. If Godwin's healthy, he's awesome. Awesome as hell. He's a catch machine. Great player to have on your team. Wanted to be a Tampa Bay Buck. So I'm surprised he didn't do a little bit cheaper deal, especially coming off injury. But I think if they could have got him for $8 million cheaper, I wouldn't be as upset about the combination of the moves. But drafting, I thought you could have drafted Jahdae Barron there and not let him go to the Broncos. Thought you could have drafted Malachi Starks there, improved your safety position, and instead you drafted Emeka Egbuka after you already re-signed Chris Godwin. Just a confusing move. And I talked about that in the NFL draft review video as well. The other thing I didn't really like was signing Kamani Vildor, the corner from formerly of the Detroit Lions. Listen to me. I've watched Vildor for like 4 years now. I don't want him on my team. I was glad the Lions didn't re-sign him. Sure, it's a good team, locker room guy. You cannot count on him man on man. Period. I know that he is not the guy you want out there. He was a depth piece for us who ended up starting, and it was a fucking disaster. So you guys didn't make a lot of bad moves this offseason so far. It's really just about where you spend some of your money in free agency and re-signing. So on to the NFC West, our final division. We have the Cardinals up first. Best thing they did was their defensive players they drafted. Between Walter Nolan, Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan, and Jordan Birch, one of my favorite players in the NFL draft, coming out of Oregon at defensive end. I love the combination of those first 3-round picks. Great moves, great picks to help a defense out that was already really good in the second half of last season. You guys go back and look at their stats, man. The Cardinals played really good defense in the second half. So to improve upon that is a great move. Another thing I like that they did was signing Josh Sweat, another defensive move, and a couple others, as well as extending Trey McBride. Go ahead and pay that man. He's a number 2 tight end in fantasy this year for the draft. For those of you drafting in fantasy, but he's a stud young tight end that's a catch machine. And if he can add to that touchdown total, he's going to be one of the best tight ends in the NFL this year. Period. He already was last year just without the touchdowns. He could be the number 1 tight end with touchdown. So we'll see what happens with that. But great move extending him. The Cardinals' worst moves, not addressing their wide receiver 2. Trey McBride is their wide receiver 2. I get that, but I would like to have a third option out there that you can count on a regular basis. And the guys they got, you just can't count on. Marvin Harrison wasn't even as dominant as you wanted him to. Now, apparently he's put on 50 pounds of muscle because he looks huge, but at the end of the day, he's still one man. And if everybody's going to pay attention to him and McBride, you need that third guy to get open. That's why Jameson Williams developing for the Lions was so important. They had a Monron Laporta. You get Jameson Williams to develop some more. It just makes the offense that much more consistent, reliable, trustworthy, especially for fantasy purposes and for NFL purposes. You need options out there, guys. And Lions got Jahmyr Gibbs. Cardinals got James Conner, who can catch passes out the backfield. That's great. But I want that third receiver because even in the playoffs, you've seen it with the Lions, they needed a fourth guy out there to be able to score. And we just didn't get it done. Defense couldn't hold up after all the injuries, whatever. But with the Cardinals, I said this about some other teams, especially in the AFC, addressing that number 2 receiver position is very important in my mind. So this is going to be your biggest flaw right now. Cardinals is not doing that. The other thing is some of your O-line decisions. You re-signed Beachum, which is a great move. You need to keep him. The O-line did pretty good last year for James Conner and stuff, but still allowing too much pressure in the passing game. And they really needed to make some more improvements in that I felt like they didn't do. So just something to think about, Arizona. Get you some improvements on that offensive line. Guy becomes available, go sign him. Go trade for him. The Rams done a lot of stuff. I absolutely love their fucking draft. It makes me sick. Just because they're a team in my conference, the Lions might have to play in the playoffs. And, I think we play them in the regular season. I have to go back and look at the schedule. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we play them later in the season. But signing Devontae Adams is their number 1 move of the offseason. Absolutely love it. They cut Cooper Kupp. He ends up in Seattle. Devontae Adams comes over. Who's better than Cooper Kupp at this point in their stages in their career and stuff? So definitely love that. Number 2 thing, drafting Terrence Ferguson, who I told you guys was my number 3 tight end coming into the NFL draft, who is a perfect fit for that offense and the style that they love to run, the Puka-type receivers, the Cooper Kupp-type receivers, those in-and-out routes, motion guys. Terrence Ferguson is going to fit in no problem with that. So love that move for them. And then obviously getting the Stafford contract figured out because clearly there were some teams that were willing to trade and pay Stafford. Trade for and pay him. So good thing they got that figured out for a couple more years, and we'll see what happens going forward. The things that I didn't like, they did not improve their defensive back room. Now there's rumors they could trade for Jalen Ramsey, bring him back, but definitely thought they could have improved upon that. Now Asante Samuel Jr., he's one of those guys out there that they could sign, or like I said, trading for Jalen Ramsey, maybe one of the other guys available we don't know about, but definitely think they need to do that. And then their offensive line decisions. They traded Jonah Jackson because of money things. But definitely feel like they need to improve their offensive line. Another one of those teams that still needs to improve upon their offensive line. Keep Stafford upright. He's been dealing with getting banged up. You need to open holes for Kyron and those other running backs. And just as a whole, you want to run a good offense, you're going to need some protection. So need to improve that offensive line some more. Did not address it enough in my mind. As far as that goes, we'll move on to the 49ers. The 49ers' best moves, extending those core players. Brock, that we talked about in the beginning. Brock Purdy, Fred Warner, George Kittle. Love it. Got Purdy on a pretty decent deal. He's getting paid right around what Goff is getting paid at $53 million a year. And that's a good value for a guy that isn't dominant. Been to 2 Super Bowls, though. Has the talent and only makes when he has better talent around him, he gets better, period. At times makes players better around him with his ability to escape the pocket and maneuver around. Love Brock Purdy as a player. I think it's a great story. Mr. Irrelevant to where he is now. Congratulations to him. And Fred Warner and Kittle I already talked about. 2 of the best players at their position, if not the best. Another thing I like the Niners did was drafting Mykel Williams. Love the kid. He was my number 2 defensive end coming into the NFL draft. Getting him at number 11 as a top 15. I think he's a top 10 talent in my mind. You can make the argument some of those offensive linemen or whatnot. But I love Mykel Williams. So the Niners getting him, not happy for me. Good for the Niners, though. Definitely think that they had to improve upon the defensive line and did so by getting him, as well as the defensive tackle out of Texas. So definitely improving that defensive line is a good move, but Mykel Williams is a special player to me, and I can't wait to see what he does in that 49ers defense with Robert Saleh back there as defensive coordinator. Niners' worst moves, not improving their offensive line. Trent Williams wants some money, but is supposedly coming back, no problem. But he's 107 years old, still one of the best NFL football players in the league at that age. I think he's actually like 37, 38. I forget what it is. But he's only got so much time left. They need to improve that offensive line across the board. They got some young guys that you like, but not dominant, not somebody that you're like, oh, man, I definitely see that guy being there for 10, 12 years. So, like I said with some of these other teams, you got to improve your offensive line. And the Niners, I didn't feel like addressed that enough. The other thing I didn't really like was losing Greenlaw. Hell of a football player. Got hurt in the playoffs 2 years ago, re-injured himself, got re-hurt again last year, so I understand they can't pay all the money out. Niners were coming to this position. Everybody talks about windows closing. I don't think the Niners' window is closed. I think the Niners had so much depth and talent that without injuries, they're still going to be a damn good team. Now, their depth is gone because the guys that were the depth part are now going to move into starting position. But those players are really good players. So, along with some of those draft picks they got this year, I think the Niners are going to be better than people expect. And they have one of the easiest schedules in the NFL as far as strength of schedule goes now. So, don't sleep on the Niners is what I'm saying. And the last team for the review video of the best and worst moves is the Seattle Seahawks. Best move the Seahawks made, drafting the safety Nick Emanwari in the second round. They traded up to get him, but he was still a steal there in an early second. This kid is a physical freak and going to be great alongside some of those DBs they got up there in Seattle. Their other best move was drafting Jalen Milroe. They signed Sam Darnold and signed him to, what was it, 3-4 year deal? I forget. I think it was a 4 year deal, but it might have been 3. After trading Geno away to the Raiders, they signed Sam Darnold. But this is like an insurance policy to me and also a special type of talent in Jalen Milroe. This is exactly what he needs, is a chance to sit down and just work on some of the mechanics of the position. I don't worry about arm strength. I don't worry about seeing the field. I worry about the understanding that there's a difference between a 6-yard and a 60-yard pass. The touch needed, and that's something Milroe still has to develop. I talked about this in a couple of other videos. Jalen Milroe has all the physical tools you could want at the quarterback position. It's about developing those intricacies of the position. So we'll see what happens with that, but I thought that was a great move by them and almost an insurance policy where if Darnold doesn't work out in a year, they got someone here that they've been training for a year. So we'll see what happens. And then things I didn't really like. Number one, trading DK Metcalf. I didn't like it when it first popped up. I didn't think they would actually do it. They did. They trade a monster, trade him to Pittsburgh, cut TJ Lockett. They still got JSN. They drafted Tony Horton out of Oregon State, I think it is, and signed Cooper Kupp. But trading DK Metcalf is never a good decision in my mind. So that's your number one mistake, Seattle. And the other thing I didn't really like is that their O-line is still a giant question. I just don't feel like they've really addressed it to the significant amount they needed to. And you see this is a trend, man. I'm big on offensive lines. If you're not watching this, and it's going to affect fantasy, for those of you fantasy football fans watching, not having a good offensive line is going to affect fantasy football because if the quarterback can't stay upright, he's going to have trouble. Now, last year, Minnesota didn't have a very good offensive line. Darnold still balled out. Problem is, Seattle doesn't have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Jason's a damn good receiver. We're going to see if he can handle the role of number one. But until that's proven, I have my concerns about Seattle as an offense as a whole and for fantasy. So you never know what's going to happen. Time will tell. Maybe they go get a receiver. Maybe they sign a Keenan Allen as a veteran to go along with Cooper Kupp. Maybe they make a trade for a guy like Chris Olave and Cooper Kupp becomes that slot receiver and JSN's on one side. You never know what could happen. But until something changes, and as far as offensive line goes, you definitely need to improve upon that. So we'll see if something changes between now and the beginning of the season. And if not, I'm going to have my doubts about Seattle's capability to win games on a regular basis, their chance to make the playoffs and stuff. So other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. We're going to get out of here. I hope you're having a good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time you're watching. Until next time, I'm out.